A quick disclaimer before we begin this chapter 3 video. This chapter is very organic chemistry and biochemistry focused. Keep in mind that these are not my primary areas of study, and I will only be going as in-depth as the book goes for brevity and clarity purposes. So as we continue, please keep that in mind. Hello and welcome back to Biology for Beginners. As always, I am your host, Morgan. This week, we're going to be talking about carbohydrates. Don't you just love that bread? As always, before we begin, we are going to pause here so you can grab either a screenshot of the terms and definitions slide so you can keep on track with the vocabulary I will be using today, or you can head on over to my Patreon, which is linked down in the description below, and grab the PDF of my entire PowerPoint for free so that you can follow along as we go. Let's move on. What exactly is a carbohydrate? Well, putting it simply, carbohydrates are sugars, and they range from very simple to very complex. Carbohydrates are also the primary source of ATP in the body, which of course is what gives you energy and allows your cells and organs, organ systems, what have you, to function properly. They also can provide the carbon skeletons that are used for other molecules that we will discuss in later chapter 3 videos, so no spoilers. And a quick little note here, when you see OSC at the end of a molecule name, it's usually going to indicate that it is a sugar. So glucose, fructose, those kinds of things. They are also broken down by specific enzymes. Moving on in our exploration of carbohydrates, we're going to begin with the monosaccharides. These are the building blocks of sugars. They are the most simple sugar you can possibly get. They are the monomer or single units that make up the more complex sugars. Their carbon number can vary from 3 to 7 carbons. However, the 5 and 6 carbon sugars are the most common that we see in nature. The position of the carbonyl, or that double bonded oxygen, will change. And as that changes, it will change the properties of that sugar specifically. If you look on the left here, you will see glucose and fructose depicted as their carbon skeletons. Notice that the only difference between these two molecules is where that carbonyl is. That is what changes the properties of those two sugars, even though they are both 6 carbon sugars or hexoses. And that position of the carbonyl is also one of the reasons why fructose does taste a little sweeter to us. But even though you see these depicted in these long chain skeleton forms, in nature you're actually going to see them more commonly floating around in the goop where they're found in a ring, which I show on the right here, highlighted with the blue background. That is the ring form of glucose. So moving on from the most simple sugars, you're going to get the monosaccharides. Sometimes you're going to put 2 of them together, and when you do that, you end up with a disaccharide. Now, you link these 2 monosaccharides together with a dehydration reaction, which we discussed in our last video that kicked off chapter 3. A dehydration reaction will remove water from the system, but you result in a disaccharide in this case. Now, shown on the left here, there's a very simple depiction of the bonding of 2 glucose molecules to form one maltose molecule. Quick fun fact about maltose, this is the sugar that is responsible for malt liquors. So now that you know that, and knowledge is power, make your friends amused at the bar, and maybe they'll care, maybe they won't. But if they don't care, they're just not cool enough. But specifically when you're talking about disaccharides, Sucrose is going to be the most common. Sucrose specifically is glucose and fructose combined to make this disaccharide. And you also know sucrose as table sugar. So when you're seeing these sugar counts on nutrition labels, that is the specific sugar they're talking about. A lot of times those nutrition labels don't count other sugars because according to the FDA, what they need to account for is sucrose. And sucrose is the sugar that our bodies are most efficient at breaking down. And like I mentioned before, specific enzymes break down specific disaccharides. So things like lactose are broken down by the enzyme lactase. And the reason why some people end up being lactose intolerant is because their body is no longer producing lactase. So the lactose intolerance is just that you no longer make the enzyme that can break it down or don't make enough of that enzyme anymore. But that is an extra fun fact for you guys for absolutely free. So what happens if you link more than 2 monosaccharides together and start forming a long sugar chain? Well, you end up with what is known as a polysaccharide. And these specific types of sugars are used for a couple different things primarily. Now, the first thing that they are used for is storage. And probably the thing that you're most familiar with would be starch. That is the storage polysaccharide that plants use. And you're probably most familiar with hearing starch in the root vegetables like potatoes here. Now, if you look at the diagram I have here, you can see that starch is literally just a really long chain of glucose molecules. Now, if you're looking at animal systems, we use a slightly different type of storage molecule for our sugars. We use what's called glycogen, which is very similar to starch, except that instead of one long chain, it is more branched. And there are other storage molecules for sugars that do range from these long chains to branched, and it also depends on the kind of sugars making up the polysaccharide. But like I said, the 2 that we are mentioning here are glycogen and starch. When you start saying these words a lot, you do tend to trip over them because they're a lot of the same letters over and over. The other common use of polysaccharides in the natural world is for structure. Now, the image here that I have shown is of cellulose, and if you notice those 3 strands, they are bonded by hydrogen bonds. Now, in reality, as they're bound, they're going to be much closer together than depicted in this image. But cellulose is the thing that is responsible for making up plant cell walls. Cellulose is also the fiber that we don't digest as humans. Of course, there are other organisms that have evolved mechanisms to break down cellulose, but in general, it is a very strong natural thing that helps plants keep their specific structure. Another structure polysaccharide that exists in the natural world is chitin, and chitin exists in fungal cell walls, so the mushrooms and things that have cell walls, and also exoskeletons in invertebrates like crustaceans and insects. Now, one thing that we hear very often when we talk about sugar is that as a whole, we get way too much sugar in our diet. And the image here on the right, you'll see a fairly common graph that is shown when trying to teach children and adults about proper dieting. And it is true that high amounts of sugar consumption are linked to health problems like cardiovascular disease and diabetes. However, most of these studies are looking specifically at sucrose or table sugar. And while I'm not saying that you should go out and eat however much sugar that your little heart desires, please don't do that. All good things in moderation. But sugar is still an important part of your diet, and you do need glucose, especially for brain function. And it's these misinterpretations of these studies that lead to people taking on these fad diets like the keto diet and other low-carb diets when their bodies do not actually require a reduction of carbohydrates. But I will jump on that soapbox in a later video when we are talking specifically about lipids and proteins, because it will make more sense in that context. My main point here is please do not cut any nutrient entirely out of your diet unless you have a healthcare provider that has deemed it necessary to do so. It is true that there are things like celiac that makes it hard to be able to eat certain things that are technically carbohydrates, but that is greatly misunderstood in the common population. There is a lot more to it than that. So please, sugar and carbohydrates are not the enemy here. Just maybe consult a healthcare provider before taking on a fad diet. But I will jump off my soapbox here since I feel myself beginning to rant, and I have tortured you all enough with biochemistry for the day. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Go have some hot cocoa, you deserve it, and a nice big slice of bread. Until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful whatever you're about to do. Thank you again for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell if you would like to see more. And if you'd like to follow me on any of my other social medias, the links are down in the description below. Don't forget to check out thereptilegoth.com for all of my articles and blog posts. If you found any value in this video and you would like to help support the channel, please check out my Patreon page. That link is also in the description down below. And a special thanks goes out to my Diamond Dragon patron, Diane V. What you're doing is really helping me fund a dream here. I will see you guys all in the next one.